commissioning technologies tailored to local context. I think some of the questions that were asked in the previous sessions will fall quite strongly and well placed also in this session. So I'll hand over to my co-moderator, Chanty, to take over. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nilesh. Before starting, I propose that we also introduce each and everyone from the different panelists, starting by myself. So I'm Jean-Philippe, working from Bosch as a sales director, also being involved in the NACAM associations, the National Component Manufacturer Association in South Africa, as Bosch have currently a manufacturing operation in South Africa. And I'm also co-chairing a working group in the IAAM through the alternative powertrain and sustainability. In this regard, maybe in addition to the presentation of the panelists, I may raise the first opening questions to further engage straight after your presentations. Sustainability has been a kind of a buzzword from the past years, but we realize now that it's more than this. It's a clear necessity from the global standpoint and also from the African standpoint. So, in addition to your presentations, can you maybe quickly, in a few words, give us your insights on how do you see this word emerging specifically for Africa? Let's start with you, Valerie, if you want to introduce yourself and quickly introduce the question.
Thank you. So hi everyone, my name is Valerie Labby, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Wahoo Mobility. And at Wahoo Mobility, we design and manufacture smart electric vehicles based in Ghana. And those vehicles are connected to our digital platform that allows us to manage the life cycle of a rider and an electric vehicle from purchase all the way to end of life. I think to your point and your question on the word sustainability, I think that there's been different kind of aspects of sustainability, micro-mobility, but I think that where I like to start is across Africa and most African markets, there is a connectivity gap. And that connectivity gap has 4 areas to it. Firstly, accessibility. Are there even vehicles, particularly in the new energy or electric mobility space, that are designed to suit the needs of African users and the realities of our infrastructure? The second area is affordability. How do we get vehicles to people on the continent in an affordable manner? And I think one of the big challenges we have is on mitigating a perceived risk profile of individual users. The third area is around connectivity. So at the heart of everything we do with Wahoo is we are aggregating data points to really be able to give a digital footprint of every user of our vehicle. And so that's allowing us to connect telematic data to repayment history, but I think also as we start to look at infrastructure and energy, there is a connectivity piece around aggregating energy infrastructure. And then I think the final piece for me when we're looking at bridging this connectivity gap is productivity. The starting point for most of these vehicles is their workhorses. So how are we also building in to the sustainable mobility kind of transition, how can we make these vehicles tools for people to actually make money? And I think if we can look at those 4 different areas at Wahoo, we've been building hardware, software, and leveraging data to be able to create a full end-to-end EV ecosystem. So
thank you very much. Can you maybe precise what type of vehicles we're talking about? Is it a 4-wheeler, 2, 3-wheelers?
So we went to market with our signature electric bike. And this is a pedal assist 2-wheeler where you can basically take the batteries off the vehicle and charge in the same way you would your phone or your laptop. And we started with that vehicle because it was an easy vehicle to localize, it was an easy vehicle to charge. Now where we're pivoting to is to be able to use our factory footprint plus our digital platform to layer on new vehicles. So adding electric motorbike, electric tricycle, and then also an electric truck with 4 cargo.
Thank you very much. So as mentioned by Nilesh in the introduction, it definitely gives a significant echo to the previous panel sessions regarding data management, and it's a great success that Wahoo was able to do everything by its own, which is kind of a way to do things. Maybe Nilesh, if you want to also present slightly more in detail who you are and what you're doing also on behalf of AAA and BNP.
Yes, thank you, JP. So, as my background is that I'm currently manager at Volkswagen Group Africa for powertrain development, which lends itself to the investigation into the topic of fuel quality and the importance of fuel quality when it comes to vehicle technology and that of emissions regulations. So I have now joined the AAAM, and at the AAAM we have a working group which specifically looks into fuels and emissions in Africa, and our key role is to lobby with markets to improve fuel quality across the continent. Fuel quality is not produced the same everywhere you go, it's different. We have cleaner fuels in Europe and Japan. We have not so clean fuels across Africa, and that's where the challenge lies with vehicle OEMs trying to introduce modern, safer technology vehicles that will be, in this case, our discussion today about sustainability, but unfortunately will not operate correctly under those environments of poor quality fuels. So we really are trying to lobby with governments, together with UNEP, together with standards bureaus across the African continent, Department of Minerals and Energies across the continent, for cleaner fuels in Africa.
All right, thank you very much, Nilesh. Karim, let's go to you. Present yourself, please, in what do you see as a key enablers in Africa for further sustainability mobility solutions?
Hi, Karim Aziz, country manager of DHL in Algeria. So we can see now it's not a buzzword, it's action from government, from private sector, and from the people. Government create the awareness, create the infrastructure, and then we start as logistics and supply chain companies to work on optimizations of the routes, multi-modal solutions for our customers. We are measuring the CO2 emission. Also, we are investing a lot on changing our fleet to e-vehicles. So we can see now a lot of countries we do the last mile delivery with electric vehicles. We are investing as a private sector in the sport. Governments are investing. So I can see this is, if we have joint vision, governments, private sector, and people, we can improve the current situation and move to a much more green environment.
Okay, thank you very much, Karim. Shall we maybe jump to the more detailed questions in this?
Thank you, JP. So we have some questions for each of the panelists, and it will be directly related to their industry and their current expert fields. So I'll start with you, JP. Bosch has a global footprint in powertrain technologies. How do you see Africa adopting global shifts in electrification and alternative fuels while building local value chains?
All right, so you're right, Bosch is a global player and across all the different mobility solutions. Maybe before jumping straight to the answer for Africa, we can have a quick look on what is currently the trends in the global situations. And talking about mobility is also very wide, going from e-bike, two-wheelers, three-wheelers, micro-mobility, passenger cars, light commercial vehicles, EV duty vehicles, and we may even extend it to maritime, air freight, aircraft. Let's take aside the railway and the aircraft and maritime because it's kind of very specific, but all over these mobility solutions, there is different type of applications, and we believe there is different type of solutions to make it greener. It goes from full electric to mild hybrid, plug-in hybrid. For some solutions, it may also even remain with an internal combustion engine, but with a cleaner fuel. Either cleaner fuel in terms of emissions, increasing the standards, or cleaner fuel with reducing significantly the emissions with alternative fuels, either e-fuels or H2 or H2 derivatives, hydrogen. And this complexity of solutions, this complexity of answers towards the sustainability is very diverse from the applications and from the region of the world. And then back to Africa. Africa in such is also very diverse by itself, from north to south, with different climate conditions, with different availability of the infrastructure, different source of electricity, the availability of electricity, and affordability. So again, the answer cannot be one for all. It will be very specific on all the different applications. Within Bosch, we try to remain very agnostic. We want to support every single solution that can bring some, it's a sustainable improvement, targeting on the long run the neutrality in the carbon footprint, but it will be a journey. We can't, again, not depending on the solutions. In some solutions, we may truck straight to the zero emissions, like maybe two-wheelers or e-bikes, jumping straight to full electric, avoiding any emissions. But with many others, we will need to make it on a step by step. And I'm guessing that the African solution, to make it sustainable as a wide sense of the word, making profitable for the industry, affordable for the customers, reducing the emissions, so all included, to make it a true business case, we need to have specific solutions. So maybe it will go through further extending the lifetime of the internal combustion engines, but having some further improvement on the fuel quality, maybe jumping to some fuel cell applications, some electrical buses, some alternative powertrain like internal combustion engines with a blend of natural gas, of decarbonized gas like hydrogen, but still running with some petrol and diesel. Everything which will help Africa to become greener will be more than welcome, as long as it fits to the purpose. In opposition to Europe, where there is some policies and plenty of incentives, which are kind of trying to change the way of using from the customer perspective by incentivizing this new way of using the mobility solutions. Africa can't afford it, gives so much of incentives, so the solution will definitely need to fit 100% the customer need. And it will most probably be very specific in Africa for Africa.
Thank you, JP.
Okay, then questions to you, Karin, please. Karin, in terms of sustainable mobility in the logistics sectors, sustainability is not only about the solution by itself, it's also on moving goods, and you're an expert on it. How do you believe that the African logistic infrastructures will evolve and support this transition?
Well, actually, there is now a lot of improvement in the infrastructure. We can see countries investing in the rail solutions now. A lot of countries are investing now in Africa in the rail solution. There is also the multimodal, the infrastructure for the roads between countries. The investments in the electric vehicle stations, investments in the green energy, as you said, no one solution can fit all, so there is investments in the green hydrogen, there is investments in the electric stations, investments in rail, multimodal. From our part as a logistics company, we are investing in our facilities to move it on more greener electricity, solar panels everywhere. We are start to introduce electric trucks in the Middle East and Africa market. We can see now introduction of the electrical trucks in We can see some in the Gulf area. We are measuring as much as we can. We have a vision for 2030 that we will be the greener country. So we are investing in the alternative fuel for our aircrafts. We are investing in the electric vehicles for our last mile delivery. We are investing and optimizing the routes of the deliveries. We have the big data analysis, so we can much more optimize and look for better solutions. So as you said, no one solution can fit all. We are working in all aspects to try to fit the solution for each country and each customer.
Okay, in the frame of this IATF and the trade between countries in Africa, do you see some specific challenges in it? I mean, if you have a cross-border trucks that goes from country A to country B with different level of fuel quality or regulations or availability of electricity, can it be a real issue for you to go into this sustainability journey?
Actually, yes. I mean, you cannot move from Egypt to Libya if you don't have the electric stations. Yet in Libya, you cannot move the electric trucks, so you will rely on the normal trucks, the fuel trucks. So it depends on it should be one vision for Africa to invest for the governments in the infrastructure, to push more, to incentivize more the electric and the green fuel. We can see also the creation of the awareness for the people to push much more for this. The joint venture between private sectors to invest much more in the green energy.
Thank you very much, Karen.
Thank you.
Thank you, JB. Ms. Valerie, question for you. So there has been talk already about 2 and 3 wheelers. So it's in the conversations in the room, and I think people are seeing that there's a need for their existence when it comes to Africa's mobility. If you could maybe just give us some insights into how you see it shaping inclusive and sustainable transport going into the future.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think the starting point for me is I'm a true believer that every vehicle on the continent will go electric in the next 10 years. So if we start with that precedent, then the question is, what investments do we need to make, and where do we need to make those investments for that transition to be inclusive, equitable, and sustainable? I think the starting point for us has been obviously 2 and 3 wheelers unlock productive potential in the market, like I mentioned before, around connectivity, because as an easier vehicle to use and potentially an easier vehicle to buy, there is going to be a lot of demand as we see mobility marketplaces really start to push more logistics services, kind of terminating with micro-mobility. But I think that the important thing from an industry perspective is also around, in order to really implement it in a way that can scale, firstly, we need to be able to frame the adoption of these vehicles in policy. And so one of the spaces that I've been sitting, I think for the last 2.5 years, I've been pushing for the automotive policy in Ghana to include a definition of electric vehicles that is broader than just a vehicle with 4 wheels, because at the moment, by having such a narrow definition in an automotive space, it's limiting innovation from the continent. And I think from the conversations that we've had today, one thing that has really been missing or kind of assumed has been that the solutions in the EV and sustainable mobility space will come from outside in. But I think my experience has been there is a lot happening on the ground from within Africa that has been limited by policy, because policy has been written for traditional OEMs. And I think the adoption for 2 and 3 wheelers will be catalyzed if we can see some of those changes in policy. I think in the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, we've seen a lot more around digital protocols on the continent. A lot of value addition is also going to come from IoT devices, from connectivity, from data. And I think that when we look at the transition just from the vehicle type, it's limiting. So, like I said, the transition is already happening, but it is important for us to structure how can it happen in a way that is a benefit to the continent.
Just a follow-up question. So you spoke about the challenges of policy. How are you addressing those challenges, and what has been your experience thus far?
So I think the first thing, like I mentioned, is the definition is too narrow. I think when you're looking at local content, a lot of policies aren't including IP ownership. When we're talking about component localization, there isn't enough of a definition around digital platforms and the role of digital components. I think there's no country that I've seen policies around R&D and the role that R&D is going to play in the automotive industry. But I think maybe just to give an example of one area where policy has helped us, in Ghana specifically, and in my case, has been around the interplay between carbon markets and Article 6 and the automotive space. So at Wahoo, we, I think, are the second e-mobility company in the world to be able to sign an Article 6 compliance market agreement. So that essentially means that as riders ride my electric vehicles in Accra, they actually earn carbon credits, which is an example of essentially foreign direct investment coming in to de-risk the overall model or the investment in e-mobility. And I think that there should be more examples of how policy has made people rethink about the opportunity of how we finance and how we scale e-mobility, particularly on the 2 and 3 wheelers.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary. And even if I agree with you on the transition, maybe the frame of the transition to full electric is maybe more than 10 years, hopefully. It will remain around 10 years, but maybe even 20. And then the question goes to you, Nilesh, because on this transition period, the fuel quality in Africa remain definitely a pressing issue. Can you maybe explain to us what progress have been made harmonizing the fuel standards across the continent?
Yes, thank you, JP. So some progress has been made at various levels. I would say that the one most outstanding achievement is that we have an African regional standard for both petrol and diesel that is Euro 4 enabling, that is published. So at this moment, every country on the continent who is not already at a Euro 4 level enabling fuel has an African standard which they can adopt. The situation in the different, let's call it communities around Africa is different. West Africa, we've seen, has very fuel standards, and they rely on a combination of imports as well as some local refinery production. That makes it quite challenging to harmonize fuel standards when you don't have the same quality of fuel from the refinery as you do being imported. Now, in some countries, it's the difference between an old refinery and clean imports, and whereas when you talk about the Dangote refinery, we have clean refinery fuel and not so clean imports. So we have that situation in sort of West Africa. We have some good news in East Africa, where the East African community is now moving towards very clean, ultra-low sulfur fuels, which is at a level of 10 ppm. And the intention is that it will become mandatory in the next 6 months. So extremely good news there. At the moment in the SADC region, there's a discussion around a harmonized standard for the SADC region. And there again, as Jane mentioned yesterday, the intention is to target Euro 4 enabling fuels. In South Africa, where I'm from, we'll be transitioning to 10 ppm Euro 5 enabling fuels in July of 2027. So the challenge is a combination of harmonizing fuel standards, but for OEMs, it's really also about what we see on the ground, what kind of fuel quality that we see in the markets themselves. But yes, that's the way we are at the moment, and that's why as AAAM we're trying to push that agenda quite strongly going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nilesh. It's also giving an echo to the discussion we had yesterday regarding the overall harmonizations all over the countries, the continent, regarding the standardizations, regarding the support on the EV policies, and Valerie was raising, and the need to have it coordinated between the countries to ease the adaptations on the EV, and Jeremy was also mentioning that, for example, the standardization of the plugin or of the between one country to another. If you want to get a truck crossing a country to another, and you have two different standards to plug your truck in two different countries, and you can't change it on your own truck. So it definitely needs such a standardization. Back to you, Karim. In the logistics sectors, how do you see the innovations, whether through digitalizations, multimodal, low-emission transport solution, will be the most relevant to Africa in these sectors?
I would say all this is relevant for Africa. Multimodal is very important. It's very effective in Africa. We have a lot of investments in rail in North and South Africa. Consolidation is a key. Consolidation, everybody will benefit from the same move, so consolidation is a key. Alternative fuels, also a key coming from China, from Europe, so you can see shipments coming from everywhere using alternative fuel to reduce emissions. So it's not only one aspect. We are trying to see all the aspects where we can put a value on how we can make the world greener. So we are investing in all. We are trying to explore more options and working with our customers, with governments, lobbying, and trying to introduce new technologies and new digital platforms. Now we can, on our platform, every customer can measure his shipment emission. So if you can measure it, you can find solutions. So trying to find better rules, optimize the rules using the big data and the analysis, and working together with governments to emphasize on this.
Thank you, Karen. Maybe just bouncing to the comment from Valerie on the IP and the R&D. Again, a question to you, Karen, sorry. But do you see any specific innovations that would be required for the African logistics sectors that will fit specifically to Africa, that may be diverse or find a different path than what you see on the global logistic development?
Well, actually, I can see the growth of the e-commerce here in Africa, so we can see that the different mobility solutions, the three-wheelers, the electric scooters, this help in the last mile delivery, and there is a huge boom of the e-commerce and last mile delivery in Africa. I think this should be applied in Africa. Young people are using the bicycles, scooters, and this is a green way of mobility, and this is a great way of the delivery. So I think this is one of the very important aspects.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Ms. Valerie, question for you. In your experience, when it comes to the business models for your battery swapping, pay-as-you-go, two-wheelers, what have you found to be that proves effective in making micro-mobility solutions accessible, particularly to low-income users? What has been your experience, and what do you believe should be done further to improve the mobility solution to those end users?
I think it depends on the use case. For us at Wahoo, we've been thinking of EVs in kind of four main segments. So EVs for gig workers, delivery workers, EVs for government, EVs in agriculture, and then EVs for security services. So this has been the use cases that we've been basically building and trying to understand and gather data on what are the business models or service models that would allow us to effectively scale up EVs in those sectors. And so where we focused as a starting point was electric vehicles for gig workers. And the starting point for us was to understand what were the pain points for delivery riders. The first thing was around most delivery riders in Ghana don't own their own vehicles. We're working for other people. And that's because petrol costs were just so expensive. So a delivery rider would have to borrow or work for a vehicle, rent a vehicle from a fleet owner, and then they would basically work and spend all their money on petrol and then take home a very small amount at the end of the day. So we said, okay, how can we transfer or change that ownership journey by being able to introduce a subscription model to the delivery riders? And so we had to really look at how do we de-risk that model. The starting point was make it a productive asset so that we get data on the earnings of the delivery rider. So we have partnerships with Bolts, Ubers, Yangos, so we can see on a daily basis how much is a delivery rider earning. With that data, it allowed us to start benchmarking how much credit we could then transfer to the gig worker. And so that allowed us to start offering, a subscription model, which essentially now gave us this data ecosystem of being able to know how much a rider is earning, and also know have a footprint of them paying off a fixed asset. The third thing for us was, as the rider was riding, it was to start building a telematic footprint of how the rider rode, which then allowed us to broker in insurance on that rider's journey, again de-risking that overall life cycle. And then finally, when we knew how a rider rides, how much they're earning, we have a profile of them paying for a fixed asset, we needed to start looking at how do we maintain that vehicle. So on our platform, we now have a digital marketplace where riders can essentially just take pictures of any issues they have on our vehicles, and then also purchase spare parts through the platform, which now allows us to also look at end of life, also crowding spare parts dealers into that value chain. So it's been a bit of a journey for us, and now we're looking at which other vehicles can we add into that ecosystem that will work for the different use cases. So I think the first starting point for us was really just taking a step back and understanding the user, and not believing the risk profiles of the traditional banks or traditional players in that market, because the reality is the majority of people in Africa don't have any vehicles at all. So the assumptions that we have around the automotive market are based on such a limited subset of people. If we do not lend and if we do not get vehicles to people who need it the most, we will never have that data to actually innovate solutions.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much, Valerie. It's definitely a good talk and a good link between the last mile deliveries in the DHL world on the logistics side. And it's very good as well to give this opportunity on the stage to also discuss about, I would say, non-conventional passenger cars, because it's also part of mobility solutions, and it drives a lot of innovations, and African innovations. Nevertheless, let's get back to Nilesh with, I would say, a bit more conventional passenger car business through VW. How does the fuel quality impact the ability of the OEMs like VW to introduce the newer and more efficient technology to the African markets? Because this is what it is about now. If we want to talk about cleaner fuel and standardization of the cleaner fuel, it's how will this bring you the possibility to bring newer technology?
Thanks, JP. So, as a member of the AAAM, I can speak on behalf of all OEMs, not just VW. Essentially, it makes it very difficult to introduce modern technology vehicles into a market because the vehicle hasn't been developed for that level of fuel quality. It's been developed for its technology, which could be much higher than what the fuel quality allows. So what that does is it limits the various models that we have to make available to a market, which makes it difficult to introduce brands, introduce models, introduce derivatives, and provide more mobility options to the end user. There's a secondary impact, which actually also needs to be mentioned. When we start looking at the actual fuel quality in the market, one of the feedbacks that we get is the level of quality, and then what it does is it asks the question, are we able to develop a product like a robust package, or a robust engine, or a robust emission system for that market? And if so, what would it look like? How long would it take? What would it cost? So actually, fuel quality doesn't just have an impact on the end user, or let's call it the life of the vehicle after it's been sold. Fuel quality actually has an impact going all the way back to the start of the value chain, where we start looking at the development of the product, its suitability for the market. And if we are going to go ahead and develop a product for that market, it starts with making a decision on if we're going to introduce technologies. Are we going to develop those technologies? And we call them robust technologies, so they need to deal with the poor quality of fuel. It's additional time, it's additional costs. When we look at the volumes that are associated with these robust solutions, it becomes quite a challenge to make a business case, to put it forward. And it does lend itself to leaving us with very limited options when it comes to products that we have available for those markets. We then have to consider what it would take to manufacture variable products on our production lines. So we have Euro 3 plus Euro 6 or even Euro 7 technologies all down the same production line. It adds complexity, so it adds cost. Then we have to ship the different vehicles to the different markets, which also adds time and cost along the process. So there's quite a big impact when it comes to variable fuel quality across the continent, and that's why if we had some form of harmonization, I think we would start to see a lot more uptake, a lot more products available, and a lot more uptake of new vehicles in Africa. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Nilesh. I think it's also linked to the key constraint of the automotive industry, which are the scale. We need to have volumes, and inside the continent, if we have an harmonized approach, we may be able to reach such a minimum volume that will make this robust engine design that will fit to the African applications, from the quality of fuel, from the climate, to the type of usage, from the external conditions on how to use it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, JP. Which actually leads to my question to you, because I've just spoken about components and after sales as well. So what opportunities exist for Africa to localize parts of the sustainable mobility value chain, from components to after sales, in a way that drives industrial growth?
So question is also very difficult to answer, because it also depends on the solutions and the type of powertrain. If we think of internal combustion engines, believing that it will remain for 10 or 20 years still, we're gonna have to see how the rest of the world is moving, because the production capacity already exists everywhere else in the world for this type of engines. But the rest of the world is getting away from this technology. So I'm believing that there is some opportunities to transfer some of these technologies into Africa, to produce and to reindustrialize this component and technology where the consumer will remain. And if Africa remains one of them, then Africa will get chance and opportunities. But again, it's not an easy play, because we have other regions which are still ahead of Africa in terms of industrializations. We most probably still remain with internal combustion engines, like Latin America or India. And we're gonna have to fight for the African sake to get some of this portion of the cake back in the industrialization side in Africa. Regarding the battery electric vehicles, this is even more tricky. Because on these transitions of new energy vehicles, we should keep in mind the key target of the industrializations of the continent, and the target of the AAAM is to bring industrialization in the continent for the continent. If, for the sake of the short-term target of reaching, let's say, less carbon emissions and getting new or battery electric vehicle cheap in the continent. We open the door to no tariffs, then the continent will be flooded by battery electric vehicles produced somewhere else. On the 2-3 wheelers may be coming from India, on the passenger cars mostly coming from China, and then all the hard work that we've been working on over the past years for the industrialization of the continent will be blown away very quickly. And it's a tough work to do because even in Europe there is a huge challenge to work. So we need to attract these key players by giving a significant attractiveness of the market in Africa to get these players industrializing the continent as we are asking everyone else on the passenger car business to do so. This will be the key to get access to both, to get access to the industrializations and to the industrializations, either from the car makers, which can be the non-European or American ones, whereas the Chinese one, in partnership with the one which are currently here, or on the component making as well.
Thank you, JP. So I think we do have time. Before we go to the last round of questions, maybe we'll just ask if there's any questions at this time from the audience. If there's anybody who'd like to... Okay, we do have a few questions, so yes, microphone please. Please, if you could state your name, your association or company, and your question, who you'd like to answer your question. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Yeah, my question is the last one is about the manufacturing, how to transfer the manufacturing to Africa, as you said, from China and India. I think for Africa is better to have the manufacturing directly in Africa, because the semiconductor manufacturing are producing the component, and those components are to build the modules in the car and so on. In Africa, why we need to go to China or to India? Because this is also make the price is very high, because for transportation and so on and so on. If we are planning to develop, for example, 1 million car by year, so it's better to have one line or 2 lines. The cost become more cheaper, and then it's more easy also to estimate the price and so on. This is my question. And the second question is, how you analyze the gaps when in Europe, in Asia and so on, for the digitalization, for the manufacturing to reduce the cost and so on? Is there any like lesson learning to know which gaps they are in Europe, in essence, to avoid those gaps and to go more further, more faster and so on in the development, especially for manufacturing?
Okay, so I think I'll attempt to answer your first question when it comes to producibility. So I think one of the challenges, and I'm not sure if you were here with the previous 2 sessions, but I'll sort of reiterate the message that previous two sessions mentioned, is that in order to have production in Africa, and a sustainable production in Africa, we need to protect that production in Africa. We need to protect it from second-hand imports. We need to protect it from also new vehicle imports if you're going to keep production lines running in Africa. So I would say, as an OEM, we agree, we want to protect what we have already in place. We want to build on what we have in place. And as Martina mentioned, we're not going to have production lines in all countries in Africa, but if we can find key locations in Africa to put up paint manufacturing facilities, to have the economies of scale, that's exactly what we will try to do. And the intention, I believe, of this trade fair and this automotive forum is to actually find that, let's call it secret sauce. How are we going to actually get to that point where we can build a car in Africa, for Africa, using African components, and get to the levels of local content and higher that was mentioned earlier in the previous session. Thank you for your question. I think on the topic of data, I'm not sure if you would like to comment.
Yeah, I think on the data side, one of the points that was made earlier was around transparency and aggregation across multiple companies. And I think that's something that is missing when we talk about partnerships. Normally we talk about partnerships in terms of resource, but we don't think about partnerships in terms of data. On our side, we're seeing it now in telematic data. You need the aggregation before you can make decisions in insurance. And I think that that's going to be the same when you're looking at manufacturing as well. To your point on components, I think that the inflection point for localization of components is also around scale. So for us, we've kind of gone on a journey where we started with, second-hand bicycles, then we moved to off the shelf, then we got an investment to do R&D and own the IP, then we moved to SKD, CKD, and now to do component localization. We need to be able to justify that investment in the supply chain by making sure we can scale up. So things like offtake from government, for example, would start to unlock or be able to justify the investment. I think other things around partnerships with other manufacturing companies where you can say there's certain components, and I think there are a lot of components that aren't being produced on the continent now, like IoT devices, that are things that there is enough capability on the continent from the universities, but there is a lack of infrastructure and investment in tooling to be able to do that. So I think it takes a point of being deliberate, and then I think there also needs to be regional collaborations when you're looking at supply chains as well.
Thank you. I think there was two more questions from that side and one over here. Okay.
Thank you. Frederick Sady from Afrique. I have two questions. The first really is relation. Is it a question of there not being standards for fuels in Africa, or is it a question of the implementation of those standards? I sort of have the impression that ASU and the AFCFT have done quite some work on standardization of fuels, and I believe that has also been adopted. I don't know if it's a question then of getting all countries to enforce those standards. So I just want to get clarity on that. That's my first question. Then the second one is to Philippe and Valerie. You don't make my job as a financier any easier because you disagree whether we're moving or we're still using combustion engines. So you tell me, what should I be financing? Combustion engines or EVs? We really need to come to some direction, but that also helps financiers in terms of the risk and go.
Okay, thank you. I'll keep my answer short. Yes, it's exactly that. It's the implementation of those standards. The standards exist. It takes energy, it takes money, it takes time, it takes understanding. So what we're seeing in the markets is that it's not so simple to implement those standards and maintain those standards, but that's where the challenge is, and that's where we come in as AAAM. But it's exactly that. They exist, we just need to try to get governments to implement them.
Easy answer is, I don't know. I mean, within Bosch, within more than 120 years of history, we still don't know. Working in the auto industry since then. And that's why we try to remain agnostic, and we want to play a role everywhere where we can bring some technology to support the decarbonization path. It will depend on the type of applications, on where the application will be. The solution won't be the same for the 2 and 3-wheelers, which most probably go straight to electric. Last mile deliveries on the logistics side seems to be very much adapted to the battery electric vehicles. The long-haul truck will remain because of the long distance and the need to really use it almost 24/7 will most probably remain for quite a long term again in a conventional fuel. Passenger car will be a mix of fuel and hybrids and BEVs depending on the type of application. So the world will become more diverse and more complex in the future.
I think on my side, so before I was in the mobility space, I was in telco, and I remember being in a meeting with my CEO at the time when he said that the business was not going to invest in mobile money because Ghanaians like to pay with cash. And for those of you, if any of you have gone to Ghana now or recently, you would see that we don't really use cash, everybody uses mobile money. And so there are points where there are inflection points where you can get immersed in what you see as working currently and miss the window for investing and where we should be moving to. And I think the reason why I have 100% conviction that within the next 10 years, all vehicles on the continent will transition to electric is because it just makes economic sense for the average African. In terms of petrol prices continue to increase, the average 30-year-old African across the continent cannot afford a new petrol vehicle anyway. And then if they are saving and working, we don't want them to be investing in second-hand vehicles. So I think the reality is it's an opportunity for us to invest in something, a transition in automotive that young Africans want, that will drive value for us economically, that would reduce our macroeconomic dependence on petrol. So I guess the question is, why would we not invest in that? Because how we've been doing transport across the continent for me just doesn't work. It just doesn't add value to us. And I think on a daily basis, I keep meeting young Africans across the continent who have the technical capability to innovate, just like we're seeing in Asia. So again, it's a larger risk for the continent not to invest in that talent. So I don't think it's a question. I think it's a matter of how can we be deliberate about our investments? What are the inflection points that we have to invest in? How can we invest in collaborations? How can we invest in R&D so that the transition that is happening can happen in a way that benefits the majority of African people?
Okay, thank you. Over there. Do you have a microphone? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Voitures is my name. I'm the CEO of Auto League International in Nigeria. I'm just surprised that each time we were discussing sustainability of mobility in Africa, we focus mostly on EVs. And for instance, in my country, we are transiting to natural gas because we have a huge deficit of it. And if you look at different things, if you look at the world supply chain, you map the supply chain of EV manufacturing, we know that EV technology is not even 100% zero when it comes to emissions. We have up to 80%, even more than having a CNG technology. That's one. If you also look at the environment we're dealing with, because we have been talking about ownership of vehicles, which is a major problem. And for different countries, there are different issues they are dealing with. Affordability is also part of it. Even if you make ownership easy for people, what people are earning may not be able to make them to afford. So, and several things that are linked to this. Employment is also part of it, because if you say you want to transit fully to EV very, very fast, don't forget the network of people that are involved in the whole value chain that are benefiting from it. So I think the problem of sustainability or mobility in Africa is a wicked problem, and we have to look at it critically. Even if you look at it, the mining of the mineral resources that are being used contributes to insecurity in most of these countries. So we have to look at it. If you focus more on natural gas as well, I think natural gas is not something that can be bunkered. You deal with bunkering and all that. So I think we should not focus 100% on EV and neglect other areas. In fact, we can only have competitive advantage because we are playing catch up in EV technology. That's just it in Africa. No, I don't think there's any patent in EV technology that originates from Africa. So I think we should look at this thing holistically and consider other areas. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that comment. Question, gentlemen, do you still have a question? Yes? No?
Thank you so much. My name is Hastings Rossi. I am from Malawi, and I'm happy to be part of this conversation because where I'm coming from, my government is spending more than 600 million US dollars just to import fuel, and there have been times whereby weeks without fuel, and that's why e-mobility is the way to go. But then the challenge has been policy. Yes, the World Bank came in to help us with at least to push the framework, whereby at least to standardize the even the charging infrastructure. But then the policy is still in process. So I'm looking at this kind of platforms. How best can we, for example, my country tries this kind of platform, whereby gone are the days whereby other countries were left behind. When you're having this kind of conversation, how best are we including other countries that are lagging behind, so that even the government are not sure about this innovation, so that at least we can be on the same board. Second question to our friend from Ghana. You mentioned something about three-wheeler battery swapping. What has been your experience like in your implementation when it comes to the battery swapping? Because that's exactly what we are pushing back home, because 30 to 40% of perishable goods from farmers are being damaged just the moment where they're trying to transport from their farms to the market. So we're trying to push in at least e-mobility in the farms. So I just want to learn from you, what has been your experience like? Would you advise a country like Malawi to adopt something like that? Thank you.
Can you maybe very answer to the last questions and then make a closing remark? We are already up to the end.
Yeah, so I think the starting point for us with the vehicle that we went to market with was a vehicle that didn't change charging behaviors. And by that I meant we designed our vehicle where you just take the battery off and you charge the same way you would your phone or your laptop. So we didn't want to introduce a vehicle that needed a whole new infrastructure network that was accessible. If anyone already had the behavior of charging your mobile phone, you basically could charge your vehicle. That was our entry point to start to understand the market. I think as we are moving towards more battery swap infrastructure, I think battery swap is another inflection point to be able to get other vehicle types into the market at scale. But I think the real opportunity is looking at the differential of that transition in energy scarce communities versus communities that have sufficient energy dependencies. So an example would be we're seeing in a lot of communities across Ghana a lot of solar energy infrastructure. So our starting point has just been our platform allows us to aggregate where we have solar infrastructure so that we can actually now start to connect battery swap networks with people who already have a retail footprint and have already made that investment into green energy. So I think that those are areas of collaboration that again come from identifying who's making those investments and how can we pull that together as a network. I think as you get to larger vehicles, again, the important thing would be around one, making the swap affordable, two, making it as green as possible, and three, making the location of these swap stations as accessible as possible. And I think this is where you can see banking partners, FMCG companies, and government really come together because they have large retail footprints that can form the basis of networks. I think one use case that I saw in the UK that was quite interesting was for telecommunications companies to start to transition legacy infrastructure for their fixed internet network, where they were already putting energy points at community levels to start to actually transition that legacy infrastructure into charging networks. So I think that there's a lot of collaborations and partnerships that need to be had for it to be macro. And I think there are a lot of players who just probably aren't in this room, don't see themselves as automotive players, that if they can step into this space would be great partners to be able to make this charging and swap infrastructure accessible.
Okay, thank you. JP, we have a tough job. We have more questions than we have time. I think I'm going to have to ask you to close and wrap up for us.
Yeah, we're going to have to conclude. Maybe we can make it quite open and we give the floor to everyone to give the last word of conclusions. And let's start if you agree. And again, not to avoid the last two questions and remarks from Nigeria. Sorry, no, we don't have time. But this was exactly the aim of the today's discussions. We don't want to say that the solution for Africa is to jump full electric. It's exactly the opposite we were mentioning. We want to make it the diversity and the complexity of the continent, of the solutions, of the applications, will make it diverse, and we will have different solutions for different applications for different countries, which makes it even more complex. But then we'll have to navigate around it to try to find some harmonization, some synergies, to consolidate enough volumes from the different solutions and applications in order to support the journey of the local industrializations, either through alternative fuel like CNGs or battery electric or plug-in, whatever will be the solutions, will be the only way for Africa to be able to balance both aspects of it, the sustainability aspect of the industry and the mobility solutions, and the industrialization of the continent. Karen, do you want to say?
Nothing more. We are in the transformation phase. Multiple solutions can be applied, multiple solutions can be tried, not only AV, not only rails, not only multi-models, but everybody is working to enhance his part, and then we'll come to a group goal and work on the most effective solution on the near future. Thank you.
I think on my side, the important thing and the exciting thing is that there is a big transition happening, whether it's to electric mobility or other sustainable types of vehicles. We cannot deny that the transition is happening, and it's happening now. I think the important thing is to be deliberate, to invest in it, to broaden policies, to allow for innovators to also have room to create these new mobility models. And then finally is for collaboration across borders, collaboration between startups and traditional OEMs. So I'm excited today that while with mobility we will be signing an MOU to crowd in a electric truck onto our platform, so that we can also start to build out a service model for EVs for agriculture.
Okay, thank you. I think that brings us to the end of session 6. If you don't mind, a round of applause to our presenters on stage today.
Let's give the floor to Valérie then for the signatures of the MOU, if you want to do it right away. Can you please table it?
Yeah, so I think I just mentioned that we'll be signing an MOU. I think the signing will happen now. If I can invite out Simon from Ox Delivers. So, like I mentioned, Wahoo, we have essentially created Ghana's first CKD manufacturing plant for electric vehicles. We went to market with our electric bike, and now we are looking for partnerships to introduce other vehicles into the market that will bridge the connectivity gap. I will hand over to Simon so he can just talk a bit about what he does at Ox Delivers, and then we can sign a touch.
I think I'd echo what Valerie said earlier about the transition is happening. It's happening throughout the automotive industry, and with respect to some of the existing OEMs, they have a big problem because they have invested a lot in the status quo, and they want to, manage that transition. There is a huge opportunity for Africa to transition to EVs, and in doing so, to fundamentally lower the cost. Our vehicles cost 80% less to run than the local available alternative, which is possible because we've developed a vehicle specifically for dirt roads and specifically for transport as a service, not for the sale of vehicles. Because as soon as you look at the sale of vehicles, you're into premium, all the problems we've talked about today of financing and so forth. So we're delighted to do this partnership with Valerie, which will extend. We have operations today in Rwanda, and we have a $163 million contract to extend across East Africa, and now we are signing our second sort of collaboration to go into West Africa with Valerie and Wahoo. Okay.
So I think that the MOU actually isn't here, but I think this was essentially a moment for us to just announce a partnership between an East African and a West African EV company to launch electric trucks. We have to shake hands.
panel sur ce que nous allons faire une petite pause déjeuner et reprise des travaux dans 30 minutes ici même, vu qu'il y a 2 sessions encore qui nous attendent à la maison.